rSlashProRevenge to fitness bullies in my spin class throw shade at me. Story 1. On New Year's Day of 2018, I resolved to get in shape. I was never overweight, but growing up in Russia and spending my very early adulthood there, I smoked like a chimney, and my cardio was garbage. Going to college in America didn't help matters because I started drinking to go along with my smoking. I decided to start going to spin class. I work at a marketing firm and chose a particular spin class because I received a free year-long membership as a holiday office party present that year. It was a generous gift because it was a trendy, pricey boutique spin studio. I've ridden bikes my whole life, so I thought, how hard can it be to ride a bike that doesn't go anywhere? But my first day in class was a rude awakening. It was clear that the class that I was attending, an early morning class for people to attend before work, was an advanced one where a majority seemed to already be part of the culture and very fit. It was obvious I couldn't keep up. The instructor was really nice and told me that since I'm new, it's a good idea for me to ride up front so that I can watch him and copy what he does more accurately, or alternatively, he can easily see what I'm doing and offer alternatives if I'm not doing things right. I thought, what a great guy and what a great class. There were 2 other students in the class, though, who gradually made my morning spin classes unpleasant. Valerie was obviously very fit. She looked like a model and obviously worked hard to look as good as she did. Boris was her male equivalent. They were both about my age, maybe a few years older, but it was clear they were far more fit than me. They were obviously very invested in that particular gym's culture, in that they were always decked out in the store brand athletic wear. I'm not going to lie, they looked good wearing it. They weren't a couple, but it was obvious that Boris had a thing for Valerie, and Valerie was aware of it and not reciprocating. Whatever they were doing, it wasn't my business. That thing about both of them being far more fit than me, they didn't let me forget it. For some reason, they seemed to take offense to the fact that I was riding up front. I can see why. The front 2 rows were filled with the very strongest, fittest people. The let's take a selfie sort of gym people, except these ones seemed actually fit. At the same time, all the other super hot girls and guys, especially the guys, were very nice to me and didn't seem to care that I rode up front, whereas Valerie and Boris would always shoot these sideward, disgusted glances at me, or smirk. I'm not a confrontational person, so I wouldn't do the thing most would do in that situation, such as say, "The hell is your problem?" I always got to class super early to dress up and adjust my bike. The gym has a policy of first come, first serve when it comes to choosing one of the 30 bikes in the studio. I noticed a lot of other people showed up early who were also clearly less fit than the stars that occupied the first couple of rows, but they seemed to self-segregate into the very back. I was still new as it was my first couple of weeks, so I sat up front because I was still finding my rhythm. I'd sit right up front where the instructor told me so that I could watch him and he could watch me. Every time he would come in, he would greet me enthusiastically and praise me for my commitment to fitness. It was little wonder his class was so popular. Everyone held him in high regard. Sometimes in class, he would shout encouragements to the class as a whole, but also give personal shout-outs to certain students. Despite the darkness of the room, when the instructor told me, "Great job there, you're killing it," I noticed both Boris and Valerie give each other a look and shake their heads, laughing. I never knew for sure why Valerie hated me, but I think it might be because we were both Russian, and no one else who went to that early class seemed to be, and she wanted to be the only East Euro girl? Who knows? As for Boris, he followed Valerie because he wanted to get with her. Boris and Valerie usually showed up right when class was starting, and the whole place was packed, and yet they were so entitled that there were always 2 bikes up front, right next to each other reserved for them. Despite the crowd at 5:30 a.m., there were still a couple of empty bikes in the middle or back, but that wasn't good enough for them. I'd be right in the front row, too. I got there early, and it was my right to sit wherever I pleased, and yet, despite them showing up at the last second, they shook their heads at me like I'm the one who's got a lot of nerve.
Shh, here's a little secret for you. This video is sponsored by none other than me and my team at Rufus Rugs. We're the masters of creating custom, hand-tufted rugs that capture who you truly are. Whether you want to transform one of our intriguing thumbnails into a rug, for a friend, obviously, or you're craving a room makeover with awesome anime-inspired designs, we've got your back. Oh, and did I mention, each and every rug is skillfully handcrafted by me and my friends. No BS dropshipping gimmick here. You'll be blown away by your rug. Hit the first link in the description to learn more.
Well, this goes on day after day for a whole month, and despite the fact that I'm no longer new and I'm starting to get fitter and don't really need the instructor so much just to survive the hour on the bike, I still sit right up front. I thought maybe the particular bike that I was selecting had some significance to Valerie or Boris, and that's why they copped such an attitude all the time. I always rode on the same bike. By this time, I was a bit chummy with a lot of the other women and knew their names, and we'd hug in the morning. I thought I should make peace with Valerie, if not Boris, who always sort of gave me an "I hate you because Valerie hates you, but if there was no Valerie, I'd totally go out with you" vibe. So when I saw Valerie that morning, as usual, she showed up right when the class started and sat next to me. I politely asked, "Was this your bike before and you were used to it? We can trade if you like." She rolls her eyes at me and gives Boris a look, and like a donkey, he smirks too. She actually says, "You should sit in the back. We're motivating people up here and you're hogging the mirror space." There was a whole wall mirror in front of the classroom. I'm thinking, what is this, high school? You've got to be 30 freaking years old and you're acting like this? Seriously, you may be fitter than me, but I'm just as tall and don't weigh any more than you do or take up any more space in the mirror, and it wouldn't matter even if I did. We're adults, or at least I am. Sigh, that's what I wish I said. Instead, I just put my head down and went on with my class. Eventually, I got so familiar with the other students because the same regulars would come to class every day that we all became social media friends. I even became social media friends with the instructor. I don't post much on social media, I don't show where I work or every single thing I do or my random brain farts, I just post the occasional photo. In one of these rare photos where I was admittedly begging for approval because I was proud of developing abs, the spin instructor himself commented how proud he was of me. A lot of people from the spin class also said nice things. I was friends neither with Valerie nor Boris on social media, but they both liked the instructor's comment on my photo, and my guess is it's because they both like to go the extra mile. They certainly never showed me any kindness in class, unlike everyone else who was supportive of me. I clicked on their names and my suspicions were confirmed. Both of them practically lived on social media and took endless selfies, showed off their bodies, and humble bragged nonstop. They also made no secret of who their employers were. Valerie tried to claim she was a model, even though it was clear her only real job was being a sales rep for a beauty brand. Valerie was only a model in the take a picture of yourself using your iPhone in front of the bathroom mirror sense. So Valerie, I guess that makes me a model too? These two were such idiots that they'd post really dumb things on each other's walls. It didn't seem like they really had lives other than to talk trash against people. I saw that they had one exchange where they were clearly talking about me. How do I know? Because they actually said my name and said that I was ugly and a wannabe and skinny fat and all this other horrible stuff. They also talked a lot about other people in the class and said horrible things and actually named names. It doesn't seem like they were friendly with the other people, even the very fit people who in some cases were even fitter. In terms of the class, they were social media friends with the instructor and some of the other teachers on the schedule, and with each other, but not with anyone else. Anyway, I actually confirmed my suspicion that Boris was low-key thirsty. After the spin instructor made a nice comment on my picture and Boris saw that I existed online, he sent me a private message asking me to go for coffee sometime. I ignored the message, which was just as well because the next time in class he ignored me and just followed Valerie's normal smirk and psh routine. I don't like to start drama, but I don't like being bullied and trashed either. I screen captured and saved a lot of both Valerie's and Boris's comments where they trashed at least a dozen people in our class and then made a dummy Facebook account. I fired off every screen capture to the owner of the studio, not just the manager of that particular branch, but the owner of the whole company in addition to the branch manager. I let them know that these two cretins were trashing many people in the morning class and creating a hostile, unwelcome environment. I was also nice enough to send the appropriate screen captures where Boris and Valerie named specific people in the class to those actual people if their accounts weren't set to where only friends could message them or post on their feeds. In less than a week, Boris and Valerie were gone. Both had their memberships revoked and were banned from every one of the brand's studios. Several of the people that Valerie insulted were sufficiently offended that they sent emails to Valerie's employer. Valerie, as previously mentioned, made no secret of where she worked, about what a hateful, body-shaming person she was and how such a person should not be any kind of brand ambassador. From what the other girls in the studio tell me, Valerie got fired from her job. Don't worry, Valerie, you still have your modeling career of taking selfies next to your toilet in your apartment. I had the pleasure of seeing some of the less patient, ripped buff dudes in class who didn't find it amusing that Boris was telling Valerie on Facebook that he could rough anyone up in class, openly offering to let him test his theory anytime, anywhere. Unfortunately, Boris was too occupied up front getting his membership canceled and being refunded and being told to never come back, please, to make such arrangements. See ya, jerk. Boris had a wannabe, unlicensed personal training business that he talked about on Facebook, and several of the men in class who had legit training certificates shut him down pretty fast. There's always Starbucks. Maybe I'll go for coffee sometime and buy it from you, Boris Ta. As for me, I still show up early, but I usually find my comfort zone in row 2 now, or even further back. There are always new students, and I like for them to sit right up front so that they feel welcome. That's what it means to be in a fitness community. Everyone's welcome. This isn't some kind of high school cafeteria. You can't sit with us, BS. I love the class so much that I kept going into 2019 as a paying member, even after my free year was finished. In 18 months, I've posted 3 pictures related to the spin class. That 4-pack is coming in nicely, LOL, from certain lighting angles anyway. Goals? Sigh. Haven't smoked in ages. Still drink like a fish. It's the Russian in me, I think. I honestly hope Boris and Valerie grow up. I low-key hope they marry because they deserve each other, though I also hope they don't breed because that much narcissism from 2 parents would result in a kid with lots of issues.
Mocking overweight people at the gym is like mocking alcoholics at Alcoholics Anonymous. What kind of human do you have to be to make fun of people for trying to improve themselves? An extremely insecure, trashy human, apparently. I think the fittest people are the nicest and the friendliest most of the time, though. They are really into their program and mostly excited to offer help or guidance to people who are starting out since they were in their shoes once before. Some just want to be left alone to do their own thing. They are rarely jerks because they are secure about their own fitness. I think a lot of fitness classes like these become very cultish and involve people trying to one-up each other. I definitely felt that vibe from how she mentions the instructor almost obsessively every character's constant need for approval and validation from the instructor. Being at the front is almost like an elite group of instructor favorites, causing resentment by those who aren't in this group, but an aura of superiority and overprotectiveness for those who are. I'm not sure if the instructor is encouraging this model or if it's happening without him noticing. But when these types of vibes are at play, everyone's behavior makes a little bit more sense, understandable, not justified.
Story 2. I've been sitting on this story for years and only recently discovered this sub to finally tell it. This happened when I was in 8th grade and I still feel a sense of pride remembering this incident. I went to a small private school that was part of a network of international schools around the U.S. This network had its own board of education that managed many things across the schools, including the firing and hiring of principals. Our school principal had decided to leave for another school in the middle of 8th grade, and the board director for our state decided to take over as the interim principal until a full-time one could properly be found, although she was expected to stay as long as a school year or 2. Many students hated her as she immediately began lording her position on the board over the other teachers and was incredibly condescending to all the students, even the high school students, and treating us all like we were little kids. She shall be called M for this story. So I had always had a problem being bullied by a clique of girls in our year ever since we were in 6th grade. They whispered insults to me in class, spread rumors about me, tripped me in the hall, tried to turn the rest of our class against me, and then made fun of me even more for having very few friends. I have Asperger's, which had been undiagnosed at the time, and they took advantage of my more literal thinking to trick me into believing stupid things to get me hurt and called me a freak for my particular interests and how into them I got. I became incredibly depressed. Towards the end of 8th grade, I decided I'd had enough of these girls, and since I was switching to another, more elite school for high school, I felt like even though I was going to be better off than them, it would be proper for me to stand up to these girls once and for all. I didn't have the confidence to go up to them on my own, so I went to a few other girls whom I knew this clique had been bullying too to ask if we could all go stand up to them together. So we planned out exactly what we were going to say and went to them during lunch to tell them to leave us alone, or we'd all go to M directly to deal with them. Not an hour later, I'm called out of my science class to go down to M's office. She had called all of us girls down. Apparently, the bullies had decided to go to M themselves and spin some sob story about how we were bullying them and that they had tried to stand up to us, but then we surrounded them and threatened them to keep quiet. M had clearly taken their story in hook, line, and sinker and began berating us for bullying those poor girls and telling us that we should be ashamed of ourselves and that we weren't allowed anywhere near them or we'd have our parents called. M even said she was friends with the mother of one of the bullies and that girl had been teased at her old school and didn't deserve such treatment here. She directly asked me what had happened during lunch and clearly didn't like the truth that I was telling because she immediately brushed it off and continued yelling at us, adding that if any of us tried to interrupt her, in other words, explain what really happened, she would have us expelled. I stayed quiet because I didn't actually want to be expelled and jeopardize my chance of getting into my new school, but I was now fuming with anger. This anger became fury when I noticed that 2 of the girls in the clique, who had been allowed to sit in on this humiliating telling off, were smirking at us from behind M's back. Once M let us finally leave, and after I took some time to cry in the bathroom, I went down to the front office to be excused from class for the rest of the day, claiming to be unwell. My mom was called to pick me up, and as soon as I got into the car, I told her everything that had happened. I have a somewhat eidetic memory, so I was able to tell her how the meeting in M's office went nearly word for word, emphasizing the fact that she had threatened us with expulsion for speaking up. My mom was furious and called M personally to give her a piece of her mind. I told my mom the names of all the other girls who had been humiliated along with me, and my mom then called their parents to tell them what had happened. Many of them called M as well to complain about the injustice done. The next day, I went back to school and retold the story to any of my classmates who asked where I had been. This not only turned many of them against the bullies who had orchestrated the entire thing, but also allowed me to convince them to tell their parents to write letters to the board to complain about M's general behavior. The entire time, I stayed away from the clique in class, and whenever a teacher noticed and pulled me aside to ask why I was actively avoiding those girls in particular, I told them that they had been bullying me and that M had them protected. I was a very good student and had a good relationship with many of my teachers, who I would sometimes keep company during lunch because I didn't have any friends to hang out with, so they believed me and made their own complaints. When M tried to confront me about them, I simply told her that I was just letting my teachers know what she had told us so that they couldn't accidentally make us work together. The whole thing caused such a mess for M that she was removed by the rest of the board as the interim principal a month later and lost her position as the board director shortly after that. I went on to my new high school feeling quite smug about that.
I love that when her first plan didn't work, she went with option number 2. Even though M's reaction made you sad at first, she got back up, telling her mom, having the other students get their parents to write the board, and having other teachers putting complaints to the board as well is awesome. She used what she had at her disposal and removed a toxic cretin from the school system. Definitely pro-revenge. It's heartening to see that their actions had a positive impact not just for themselves, but for the entire school community too. As much as I don't feel too bad for M losing her job because she was clearly biased in the first place, I hope the bullies faced actual consequences for their actions and not just slaps on the wrists. The craziest things happen in 8th grade. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you made it this far, I'm sure you'll also enjoy r/MaliciousCompliance. I shut down the whole organization. Story 1 was unreal. We'll see you in that video.